The first hard frost had turned the cinders beside the rail line pale as ground bone, and Iris Calder was careful not to step where the whiteness had settled. It was the only clean thing she had seen since sunrise. Everything else on the north edge of Lorne Junction looked chewed and emptied. The loading platforms with their splintered lips, the elevator bins with tin siding peeled back by wind, the burned-out diner where sparrows lived above a counter blackened by old smoke. Even the tracks seemed tired. Their steel backs pushed through weeds and reddish gravel, 2 long scars leading toward the pass. Iris had slept under the overhang of the freight scale until a watchman found her before dawn and struck the corrugated wall with a length of pipe. He had not touched her. He had only shouted until she crawled from the nest she had made of flattened feed sacks and a coat too thin for the basin wind. She had kept her face turned down while he told her the town had ordinances, that the mission house was full, that people got hurt around rail property and then expected someone else to pay. When she asked whether the old soup room would open that morning, he said it had closed for the season. For the season meant for people who had somewhere else to be cold. By mid-morning, she had left the last houses behind. The road to the highway curved south, but a boy at the gas station had said there was nothing that way except 40 empty miles and a checkpoint where freight crews stopped giving rides after a fight in September. The tracks cut northwest instead, toward a chain of low mineral hills and the old mining cut called Glass Hook. Iris did not know whether the rail line was dead or merely sleeping. The ballast still held the rectangular marks of recent maintenance tires in a few places, and the spikes were not loose enough to lift by hand. Far away, a signal mast stood with no lamps in it, a black ladder against the washed sky. She walked because walking produced heat, and because stopping made thoughts gather. Her left boot had split where the sole bent. Frost touched the toe every time she stepped through weeds. She kept one hand closed around the empty cloth purse in her coat pocket, not because it held money, but because the pressure of it gave her fingers a job. The purse had belonged to her mother, and its clasp still worked. Inside was a needle, a folded picture too worn to show faces, and a square of paper with an address in a city she had never reached. The rail bed rose from the open basin into darker ground. Low pines began appearing in the draws, bent inland by years of wind. The smell changed from old grain dust to cold stone, juniper, and the bitter metal scent of abandoned work. Along the line, telegraph poles leaned with green glass knobs still screwed to their crossarms. Iris counted them without meaning to. Counting was another way to keep fear from speaking too loudly. At the 23rd pole beyond the last warehouse, she saw the footprints. They were so fresh that the frost had not closed over them. Each print cut through the white skin on the cinders and exposed the black grit underneath. They came from the east shoulder of the track, angled across the ballast, crossed one rail, stepped carefully over the other, then moved toward a slope where broken boards and rusted cable marked the entrance to an old mine road. The person who made them had walked with purpose, not wandering and not drunk. One print had a clean bar across the heel. The other had a crooked crescent missing from the outside edge. Iris stopped with one foot suspended above the ground. Her first thought was that another person meant trouble. Her second was that the person had gone where people were not supposed to go in weather that could kill by evening. The tracks in the frost were narrow enough to belong to a woman or a slight man. They had been made after sunrise. They were not blurred by wind. She looked back along the rail. No one moved between the poles. The basin was empty, except for a black bird lifting from the diner roof far behind her. Ahead, the track curved into a cut where basalt rose on both sides, making a dark notch in the hill. The footprints did not follow it. They climbed the mine road for 20 paces, passed between two rotten posts, and ended at the wooden collar of a shaft. Iris went near because she could not make herself do otherwise. The shaft was not a wide mouth like a quarry pit. It was a squared opening framed by old timber sunk into rock, half covered by a warped sheet of corrugated iron that had been pulled aside and left leaning against a mound of waste stone. A sign lay face down among weeds. When Iris kicked it over, gray paint flaked from the words, "Glasshook number 3, and a warning that had once been read. Someone had scratched new marks through the old letters with a nail or blade. Keep the cover light, leave air. The footprints stopped at the edge. No matching tracks led away. There were no scrapes in the frost to show that someone had slipped. No handprints on the rim. No scattering of cinders from a fall. The last pair of prints stood squarely before the opening, toes pointed into darkness, as if the ground had accepted the walker and then healed over behind them. Iris crouched. Cold came from everywhere else on the hill, but the shaft breathed warmth. It rose in slow pulses that smelled of wet iron, stone dust, and something faintly sweet, like water kept too long in a tin pail. She held her hand above the gap. The warmth touched the cracks in her knuckles and made them ache. A sound came up from below. Not a voice. Not at first. A small, patient tapping traveled through the dark, paused, then repeated. 2 taps close together. A scrape and 1 tap after. The pattern was too deliberate for dripping water. Iris leaned back so fast that her split boot skidded on cinders. She told herself the sound was a loose pipe, a chain, a bit of metal moved by the breathing of the shaft. She told herself no sensible person followed footprints into a mine. She knew old shafts swallowed men who had maps and lamps and families to notice their absence. She knew darkness was not emptiness. She also knew that no one from Lorne Junction would come this far before dusk, unless paid to do it. And no one had paid anyone for Glasshook in years. The tapping came again, softer. Iris stood and looked at the slope, the tracks, the empty sky. She thought of the watchman with his pipe. She thought of the mission sign turned around in the window. She thought of all the times people had stepped over her, as if the world could close its frost over a body by noon. She took the corrugated sheet in both hands and pulled it a little wider from the opening. A ladder was bolted into one side of the shaft. Not wood, as she expected, but iron rungs set in pairs along the wall, each one coated in mineral crust and rust. The top 3 were dry. Below them the shaft widened, then narrowed into a square darkness that swallowed her sight. On a peg beside the collar hung a coil of cord, recently unwound and rewound in haste. It was not rope, but old telephone wire braided with strips of canvas. A glove lay beneath it. The glove was damp at the palm. Iris picked up the glove. The fingers were stiff with cold on the outside and warm inside. She whispered hello into the shaft. Her voice went down flat and came back smaller, shaved by stone. The tapping stopped. For several seconds there was nothing. Then a voice rose from below, so thin and distorted that she could not tell whether it belonged to a man or a woman. Cover? Iris swallowed. What? Cover. Don't drop it. The words came in pieces, pushed upward by air. I won't, she called. Are you hurt? The answer dissolved into a cough. Then came another word. Wheel. Iris waited for more, but the voice did not return. She backed from the shaft and looked down at her hands. They had begun to shake, not from cold. If she went back to town, no one would believe her quickly. They would ask what she had been doing on rail land. They would ask whether she had been drinking. They would make her wait in an office while dusk came up the hill, and the mine swallowed its heat, and the voice below became just another story nobody could verify. At the shaft rim, bolted to a beam blackened by age, hung a small metal box. Its latch had been cleaned of rust. Iris opened it. Inside was a stub of pencil, a folded square of oilcloth, a candle end, and a miner's cap lamp shaped like a dented cup with a hook on the front. The lamp was not modern. It had a tiny reservoir and a cotton wick hardened with old fuel. Beside it lay a match tin wrapped in waxed thread. She struck 2 matches before one caught. The flame leaned toward the shaft. When she touched it to the lamp, the wick sputtered, smoked, then steadied into a low yellow tongue. The light was weak, but it was real. Iris put the lamp hook through the buttonhole of her coat and sat on the rim. The first rung took her weight, with a complaint that traveled through the bolts. She climbed down, facing the wall, one hand at a time, placing the split boot carefully so the sole would not peel loose. The warmth increased after 20 feet. The shaft walls sweated. Mineral threads shone like dried tears in the lamp glow. Above her, the opening shrank to a square of winter. The ladder ended on a landing of planks built into the side of the shaft. From there, another ladder continued down, but a drift opened ahead of her, its ceiling braced by squared timbers. The floor held a dusting of gray mud, and in that mud, she saw the same footprints. The clean heel bar, the crooked crescent, moving inward. A wire had been strung along the left wall at shoulder height. Strips of cloth were tied to it every few yards, pale knots in the dark. Iris touched one and found it dry. The air was warmer here, but not fresh. It carried a stale heaviness that made her breathe through her mouth. The tapping came from ahead. She followed the wire. The drift was not like the open, collapsing mines she had dared to shelter near in other towns. Someone had cared for this passage long after the company left. Loose rock had been stacked neatly behind low retaining boards. New wedges had been driven into old timber joints. Tin reflectors, cut from food cans, had been nailed behind corners where a lamp might need help. Every 20 paces, a white porcelain tile was fixed to the wall with a number painted in black. The first read 12, the next 11, then 10, counting downward as if she were descending into the numbered ribs of a buried animal. At tile 8, she found a shelf holding 3 jars of water sealed with cloth and wax. At tile 7, a wooden box marked breath cloths held folded squares of flannel and a bottle that smelled sharply of vinegar. At tile 6, a small wheel protruded from the wall beside a note written in block letters on roofing tin. If the air tastes sweet, turn half, wait, then go back. Iris did not understand it, which made it frightening. She turned the wheel half a turn because a person below had said wheel, then waited because the note told her to. Somewhere ahead, a flap opened with a wooden clack. Cooler air slid past her knees, stirring dust and the lamp flame. She coughed once, then again, and the heaviness eased. The footprints continued. The drift opened suddenly into a chamber large enough to hold a streetcar. Iris lifted the lamp and saw walls faced with stacked stone, a floor of fitted planks, and a ceiling crossed by beams dark with tar. It was a room made inside the mine, not for taking ore out, but for keeping people alive within. Shelves lined 2 walls. Some held tins with paper labels gone brown. Some held folded blankets wrapped in canvas. A long table stood in the center, its surface scarred by knife cuts and burn rings. Against the far wall, pipes rose from the floor and entered the stone like black tree roots. They ticked with heat. The chamber smelled of dust, paraffin, old beans, and warm metal. A stove stood cold in one corner, but the room itself held a mildness impossible for the season outside. Iris stood inside it, astonished by the simple fact of not shivering. Her ears filled with the tiny sounds of the place, water moving somewhere below, a pipe knocking, a rope rubbing faintly over a pulley, the far tapping that had drawn her there. On the wall above the table, someone had painted a sentence in careful letters that had faded, but not vanished. The underpantry is for the ones the weather was told to take. Iris read it twice. She did not understand who had written it, but something in her chest moved and then closed again. Places with promises usually belong to other people. A fresh smear of mud crossed the floor toward a narrow door in the far wall. Beside the door hung another oilcloth square, opened and pinned by a knife. It was a map of the mine, but not the sort meant for engineers. The lines were simple and thick. Rooms had names written in pencil. Warm room, dry shelf, spring teeth, wheelhouse, chain rise, south vent, day crack. A small black X had been marked recently near wheelhouse. Below it, a sentence had been added in a cramped hand. If the lights fail, the pipe heat will die behind it. Iris looked up. Lights. She had not noticed them because only the lamp made brightness now. But along the ceiling ran a line of small bulbs under wire cages. Their glass was dusty. They were dark. Iris crossed the chamber and lifted the latch. The door stuck at first, swollen by damp, then opened into a lower passage where the warmth changed to wet heat. The floor sloped down. Her lamp showed a set of narrow rails embedded in the planks. Not the wide track outside, but mine rails just far enough apart for a small cart. A cart stood overturned 10 yards ahead, one wheel still spinning in slow ticks. Past it, the passage bent. Beyond the bend, a man's voice said, "Don't put weight on the left boards." Iris froze. "Where are you?" "Past the cart. Keep to the right. Are you alone?" She almost laughed. The question had followed her from town to town in one form or another. Alone was the plainest thing about her. "Yes." "Good," the voice said, and then, after a breath, "Bad, but good." She crouched and studied the boards. The left side was dark with water and bowed between supports. She stepped to the right rail, using it like a narrow bridge. The overturned cart held sacks of mineral crust, broken into white chunks. A crowbar lay beneath it. She dragged the bar free and carried it because her hand wanted something heavier than a lamp. The passage ended at a doorway partly blocked by a fallen timber. Beyond it was the wheelhouse. The first thing Iris saw was movement. A black iron wheel taller than she was turned slowly in a stone trough. Water struck its cups from a narrow chute, but the stream came unevenly, coughing over the edge in bursts. The wheel had once driven belts that ran up into darkness. One belt hung slack and wet. Another moved in fits, pulling a shaft that jerked and stopped, jerked and stopped. A man lay behind the fallen timber, with one leg pinned beneath a crossbeam. He had white hair cut close to his skull, a beard the color of ash, and a face lined deeply around the mouth. He wore boots with mismatched soles. One heel had a clean bar across it. The other had a crescent missing. Iris set the lamp on a stone. The man watched her as if trying to decide whether she was a fever dream. "You're not Hask." "I don't know Hask." "Good," he said again, weaker this time. Hask would have brought arguments before help. "What happened?" "Spring teeth shed stone. Wheel choked. I came down to clear it and the chain kicked." He drew a breath through his teeth. Beam came loose when the belt snapped. "My name is Olin Y." "Iris." "Iris," he repeated, as if pinning the name to something in his mind. "You followed my boots. They ended at the shaft." He closed his eyes. "Should have swept the collar. Forgot my own habit. Can you move?" "Everything except what matters." She knelt by the timber. It had fallen diagonally across his thigh, not crushed flat, but locked between the floor and a bracket on the wall. The bracket had bent. The beam's weight was more than she could lift. She tried anyway. Her palm slipped on damp wood. Olin did not cry out, but the color left his face. "Stop," he said. "Wedge first. Always wedge, before asking weight to move." His calm anger steadied her, more than gentleness would have. He pointed with 2 fingers toward a rack on the wall. Blocks, wooden steps, hammer. The rack held wedges cut from oak, a short sledge, a wrench, and a jack with a screw handle. Each tool had been rubbed with oil and hung in a painted outline. Iris brought the jack. Olin told her where to set it, then made her move it half an inch so it would push upward instead of sideways. She wedged the beam as the jack lifted. It took both hands and all of her back to turn the handle. The screw groaned. Water spattered the floor. The wheel jerked behind her like a restless animal. When the beam rose enough to free his boot, Olin slid his leg by inches. Iris saw no blood, only swelling under the trouser cloth and a boot twisted at a wrong angle. That was bad enough. She helped him drag himself clear. He clenched his jaw so hard that a vein stood in his neck. They sat against the wall while the wheel shuddered in its trough. Olin explained in short, broken pieces while the wheel shuddered beside them. The warmth in the chamber above was not charity from the earth alone. The spring pipes needed the wheel to push heated water through the walls, and the vent needed to breathe before any fire could be trusted. The stone lodged in the spring teeth had to come out first, then the belt had to catch. Iris said she was not a miner. Olin looked at her, pale with pain, and said the first people who kept the place had not been miners either. "What are spring teeth?" she asked. Olin's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good question. Means you haven't decided to be useless." He pointed to the chute above the wheel. Water entered through a comb of iron bars fitted into stone. Mineral scale had built on them like yellow bone. One bar had bent inward. Behind it, something pale and angular blocked half the flow. "Use the hook," he said. "Not your hand. Water bites in there." Iris found the long hook leaning near the trough. The work looked simple until she began. The current pulled the hook sideways. The mineral chunk lodged behind the bars refused to move. Her lamp smoked in the damp. Her sleeve soaked through. Twice the hook slipped and cracked against iron hard enough to jar her shoulders. Olin did not fill the room with encouragement. He watched and gave instructions only when they mattered. "Turn it. Don't pull. Let water help. Foot higher. If you fall, fall backward." She hated him for that last one because it was useful. At last, the chunk shifted. Water punched through the comb and struck the wheel with a sound like a deep breath released. The wheel turned faster. The slack belt slapped the air, caught the edge of its pulley, and flew off again. Olin swore softly. "Belt fork," he said. The belt fork was a long wooden pole with a curved iron shoe at its end. Iris had to stand near the moving wheel and guide the wet belt back onto the pulley, while Olin shouted timing from the floor. The wheel's cups threw water against her coat. The belt came around in heavy loops, each pass capable of breaking fingers. She waited until Olin said now, then pushed. The belt climbed, slipped, climbed again, and seated itself with a wet smack. Above them, the line shaft spun. A bulb glowed faintly in its cage, orange at first, then yellow-white. Another answered. Another. Light traveled down the wheelhouse like cautious footsteps. Iris lowered the fork and found that she was breathing hard enough to hurt. Olin looked up at the bulbs. His eyes shone, not with tears exactly, but with relief too sharp to hide. "There," he said. "The old lady still has a pulse." Getting him out of the wheelhouse took longer. They used a canvas sling and a low-wheeled board meant for hauling pipe. Iris cleared the overturned cart from the track by levering it upright with the crowbar. One wheel squealed until she found the oil can and worked the axle loose. Olin insisted on collecting his tool roll before they left, though his hands shook when he reached for it. They moved up the passage inch by inch. Olin dragged with his arms, while Iris pulled the wheeled board by a rope. At the bad boards, she laid 2 planks across the right side and moved backward. bracing herself against the rail. The mine seemed louder now that the wheel ran. Belts turning behind walls, water ticking in pipes. A faint hum from wires awakened after near failure. The underpantry chamber, when they reached it, had changed. The bulbs glowed under their cages. Heat moved from the black pipes in a steady, gentle push. Shadows retreated into the roof beams. Iris settled Olin on a bench near the table. His face had gone gray, and his breath came shallow. "Blankets," he said. "I know what blankets are. Top shelf are dry, lower shelf are mouse-chewed. You need to learn when not to supervise." It has not come up often. She took the top shelf blankets. They smelled of cedar chips and enclosed years. She wrapped his leg without touching the swelling more than necessary, then brought water from one of the sealed jars. Olin drank a little and closed his eyes. For the first time since entering the shaft, Iris stood still. The underpantry was not a room one glance could finish. With light came details. Hooks by the stove held ladles and a bread peel, both blackened from use. A shallow cabinet contained tin plates, each scratched with a different mark. A ladder, a crescent, a square, a little comb of lines. Bundles of split kindling were tied with cotton string and labeled by date, none older than 2 winters. A shelf near the table held jars of dried apples, beans, salt, lamp wicks, iodine, thread, buttons, boot nails, and folded paper packets of seed. The seed packets surprised her most. They made the room feel not hidden, but waiting. Only after Olin was wrapped and breathing more evenly did Iris notice the cloth band on the far wall. It was made of old flour sacks, apron pieces, and sleeve cloth stitched into a long record. Some names had faded, but the first panel could still be read. In the winter of 1917, when the Glass Hook Company locked the boarding sheds and stopped selling food to families paid in scrip, the rail kept hauling ore, while women, injured workers, and children were told to scatter. A laundrywoman had found the warm crack in the mine. Others tapped the spring, built shelves from crate boards, hid flour in sleeve bags, and called the chamber the underpantry. It was not a hiding place because it was secret. It was a hiding place because official mercy had never reached that far down. Olin drew the map toward him and tapped a route with the pencil. "South vent is through dry shelf, then low passage to day crack. You'll need the short shovel, the folding saw, and the green lens lamp." She packed the tools Olin named into a canvas satchel. The green lens lamp was a hand lantern with a cracked chimney and a sliding colored glass panel. She lit it from her cap lamp and watched the flame steady. "Take chalk," Olin said. "Mark your turns. I can follow a passage. Everyone can, until smoke, fear, or darkness edits their memory." She took the chalk. The route to South Vent began behind the shelves, through a door so low she had to bend nearly double. Dry shelf was a long room cut into stone and lined with bins. It held sacks of oats inside metal drums, coils of rope hung from pegs, spare boots stuffed with paper, wool socks tied in pairs, and crates marked with dates from years Iris had not lived through. Some supplies were old enough to be useless, but much was not. Someone had kept the room with steady hands. There were traps set for mice and notes on lids. Check for damp. Rotate before first frost. Do not trust swollen cans. Beyond dry shelf, the passage narrowed. The ceiling dropped until Iris had to crawl for 12 feet, pushing the tool satchel ahead of her. The rock pressed cold against her back. At the end, she emerged into a sloping crack where air moved faintly across her face. She marked an arrow on the wall with chalk. The green lamp made the mineral stains look underwater. The punk sticks were as Olin described, small lengths of soft, half-rotten wood packed in a tin. She lit one. It smoked without flame, a thread of gray that should have drawn toward the vent. Instead, it curled around her hand and sank. Iris whispered a word she would not have used if anyone else could hear. The passage climbed. She followed it to a choke point where broken stone and dirt filled most of the way. Above the blockage, a hole the size of her fist showed a needle of evening light. Fresh air seeped through, cold and thin. It smelled of snow. She set the lamp down and began digging. The short shovel was made for confined spaces, which meant it saved her from being useless rather than making the work easy. She scraped dirt into a canvas pan, dragged it back, dumped it, returned. Rocks had to be freed with the crowbar. Roots threaded through the fall from a pine somewhere above, gripping the dirt like fingers. She used the folding saw to cut them, teeth rasping in the dark. After 20 minutes, her shoulders burned. After 40, sweat cooled under her coat. The mine breathed badly around her, air sluggish, lamp flame low. The work was slower than fear wanted. She scraped dirt into a canvas pan, dragged it back, dumped it, returned, and cut pine roots that had threaded through the fall. Her shoulders burned. Mineral dust pasted itself to her sweat. At last, the hole widened enough for cold to touch her face. The hole widened to the size of a bowl. Cold air poured harder. The lamp flame lifted. She pressed her face near the opening and saw through it a steep outside slope, blue with dusk, the black legs of pines, and beyond them, a strip of rail line below. The vent did not open onto the mine road. It looked down toward the tracks from a hidden cleft. No wonder the place had stayed secret. Anyone passing below would see only broken rock and brush. Then she heard an engine. Not a train on the rails. A truck engine, grinding low in second gear. Iris held still. Tires moved on gravel somewhere above the mine road. Voices followed, muffled by stone. Men. At least two. A door slammed. Metal clanked. She crawled back from the vent hole and pinched out the punk stick. Her heart had begun beating too fast. The voices came clearer through the opening. Lights still shifted. Somebody's been at it. County said cap it, Hask. We cap it. I know what County said. County won't pay if we drop the old cover, and a hobo climbs out with a broken neck next week. Then make sure nobody climbs out, Laughter answered. Not cruel exactly, but careless enough to be worse. Iris pressed her palm against the rock. Hask. Olin had said Hask would bring arguments before help. Another man spoke. You sure Y ain't around? His shack's got smoke sometimes. Old man's been warned. This is rail lease now. Survey crew comes Monday. They don't want a shaft breathing under their insurance forms. A chain rattled near the shaft collar. The sound traveled down through the mine like teeth, chattering in a wall. Iris backed down the passage too fast, struck her shoulder, and almost dropped the lamp. She crawled through the low section and returned to dry shelf, then the under pantry, where Olin had pulled himself upright against the table. Truck, she said. Men at the collar. One is Hask. Olin's face changed. Not surprise, resignation sharpened by anger. Capping crew. They said survey Monday. They're sealing it. They have threatened for years. Easier to pour concrete into memory than learn why air comes out warm. They'll trap us. Only if they finish. She looked toward the shaft passage. Can we climb before they do? You might. I cannot. I won't leave you. You may need to leave first to stop them. They won't listen to me. Likely not. It was too honest to be comforting. Above, a heavy object struck timber. Dust sifted from a beam in the underpantry ceiling. The bulbs trembled. Iris heard men dragging the corrugated cover aside, then the knock of chain over the shaft rim. Olin gripped the edge of the table. There's another way out through Daycrack if the vent opens enough. No man with my leg can use it, maybe no girl with sense. I'm not full of that. The shaft can be delayed. In the hoist alcove, there is a counterweight brake. If you release it wrong, you lose fingers. If you set it right, the cage frame rises into the collar and blocks them from dropping fill. There's a cage? Half a cage. We don't use it for people. Used it for sacks when my back still negotiated. Can it carry you? Not safely. Not until we inspect the chain. Not while men are throwing scrap down from above. Iris felt the shape of the problem close around her. Olin could not climb. The vent was partly blocked. The men above were not murderers, which meant they would not think like murderers. They would think like men completing a job in cold weather before dark, annoyed by complications they did not believe in. If she called up, they might stop. They might also order her to climb, haul her out, send her away, and seal Olin behind the explanation that no one else had answered. She had been told enough times that people like her invented danger for attention. A hidden warm room under a mine shaft would sound like hunger talking. "Show me the brake," she said. Olin looked at her for one measuring second. Green door behind the stove. Take the wrench with the red string. The hoist alcove was small and smelled of grease and cold cable. It opened onto the shaft through a barred gate. Beyond the bars, Iris could see the ladder she had descended, and far above, a shifting patch of gray evening where the men worked. The hoist cage was below the alcove, suspended in darkness. Its cable rose past her through a pulley and into the old machinery. A drum, gears, a brake wheel, and a counterweight line that disappeared into a side slot. Everything looked capable of removing skin. Olin had followed as far as the doorway, dragging himself on the wheeled board with furious effort. He instructed from there. Red string wrench on the keeper nut. Loosen 2 turns. No more. Iris did it. The nut resisted, then gave. Now the brake wheel toward you until the painted mark meets the notch. She turned. The wheel did not move. She set both hands on it and pulled. It released suddenly. The cable groaned. Somewhere below, the cage shifted. "Hold," Olin said. "I'm holding." No. Hold as in do not breathe pride into it. Above, a man's voice dropped down the shaft. "Hey, who's down there?" Iris did not answer. The brake wheel strained under her palms. The painted mark crept toward the notch. The voice came again, louder. "Why? That you?" Olin shouted from the doorway, and the shaft carried his voice up stronger than Iris expected. "Do not drop anything into this shaft." A pause. "Well, I'll be cursed," Hask shouted. "Old man, you picked a fine time to play badger." "I am injured." Another pause. Longer. "You got somebody with you?" Olin looked at Iris. She shook her head before she knew why. Not because she wanted to hide, because she knew the tone that would come next if they heard a young woman's voice underground, where no one had invited her. Rescue would become accusation. The story would turn around and point at her. Olin saw enough to understand. "I have help," he shouted. "Send him up." "Him cannot leave," Hask swore. "We got orders to secure this hole. You have ears. Use them." The man with Hask said something Iris could not catch. Metal clanged again, farther from the opening this time. The brake mark reached the notch. Olin said, "Pin." Iris slammed the locking pin down. The counterweight engaged. The cable tightened, and from below came the long, scraping rise of the cage frame. She watched it pass the alcove, a rectangular skeleton of iron and wood, empty except for a coil of rope and a crate. It moved slowly up the shaft, groaning as if awakened angry. Above, men shouted and scrambled back. The cage reached the collar and lodged beneath it with a deep wooden boom. The shaft opening narrowed to bars and cage floor. No one could dump fill now without first dealing with the hoist. Olin let out a breath. That buys quarrel. Is quarrel good? Better than concrete. Hask's voice came down sharp. You jammed it. I secured it. You always were a mule. And you always thought a paper meant a place was empty. Then Hask said, quieter, "You really hurt?" "Yes." "Bad?" "Enough. We'll call town." "No signal up here," the other man said. "Radio's dead past the cut." "You have the truck," Olin shouted. "Road's iced in the shadow already. We nearly slid coming up." Iris stared at Olin. He closed his eyes briefly. The world had arranged itself with cruel neatness. The men could not quickly bring help. Olin could not climb. The shaft was blocked by the cage. The vent was not open enough. Hask shouted again, "We can lower rope." Olin looked down at his leg. "Rope will tear me apart." "Then what?" Olin's answer came slowly. "You wait. You do not cap. You do not drop. You build a windbreak at the collar and keep the cover light." Hask said something too low to hear. The other man laughed once, disbelieving. Iris stepped to the gate and shouted before she could stop herself. "And you don't leave." Her voice rang up the shaft, young and rough, and unmistakably not Olin's. Another silence. "Who is that?" Hask called. "A person!" Iris shouted. "That should be enough." Olin's mouth moved as if he might smile despite pain. Hask did not answer immediately. When he did, the edge had gone from his voice, replaced by uncertainty. "All right, person. We ain't leaving until we know what hole we're standing over." Iris wanted to trust that. She did not. Trust was too expensive to spend on a voice above a shaft. But she heard movement change. The men were no longer dragging material toward the collar. They were pacing, talking, testing the cage with boots. Buying quarrel had worked. Olin's hands had begun to tremble. The effort of reaching the alcove had emptied him. Iris dragged him back to the under-pantry and settled him again near the pipes. His skin was cold under the heat. She found a tin marked fever and pain, but he refused 2 tablets until she read the label aloud and checked the date. "The vent," he said. "I know. Daycrack must open. If they can't get down and I can't go up, you need a way through." "What happens if I open it?" "Air improves. Fire becomes possible. You might fit out. Then you can guide help from outside, not from a hole they fear." "And you?" I remained stubborn. The second trip to South Vent was harder because Iris knew too much now. The mine no longer felt like a secret she had discovered. It felt like a body with failing parts, and she had become one of the parts before agreeing to anything. She crawled under stone, marked chalk over chalk, and returned to the blockage. Cold air pressed harder through the gap. Outside, dusk had deepened. She could hear Hask above at times, his voice carrying oddly through rock and timber. He argued with the other man about tarps, about whether the old man had lost his mind, about whether the girl below was real trouble. The other man wanted to drive back before the road froze completely. Hask told him to try explaining that to the county if 2 bodies were found in April. 2 bodies. Iris dug faster. The root mat gave way in strips. Dirt slid into her sleeves. She braced the folding saw with her knee and cut a thumb-thick root that released a smell of raw pine. More evening opened. The hole became wide enough for her head and shoulders, but below it, a stone slab blocked the lower half. The slab was flat, not fallen naturally. Someone had set it there years ago as a door and covered it with rubble. She scraped around the edges until she found an iron ring recessed in the stone. "Olin," she muttered. Though he could not hear, "You might have mentioned the door." The ring did not move. She looped rope through it and pulled until her hands burned. Nothing. She wedged the crowbar under the lower edge. The stone shifted a hair, then settled back. She studied it, angry and panting, and then remembered the phrase on the shaft. "Keep the cover light. Leave air." Not all covers were meant to be removed by force. She cleared higher and found a wooden peg driven through a bracket at the top of the slab. The peg was hidden under clay. When she knocked it free with the hammer, the stone door tipped inward so suddenly, that she had to throw herself sideways. Cold air flooded the passage. Snow dust blew across the floor, fine as sifted flour. Day crack opened. Iris crawled through into the outside evening and found herself on a ledge no wider than a table, screened by pine roots and broken rock. The rail line lay below, its steel rails faintly silver in the last light. The shaft collar was around the shoulder of the hill, out of sight. Above and to her right, the capping crew's truck headlights glowed through trees. She could leave. The thought arrived whole and silent. She could climb down the slope, cross the tracks, and walk until the mine was behind her. She had eaten. She had warmed herself. She had done more for Olin than most would have done. The town would not thank her. The men above might blame her. Hidden places became cages when adults and paperwork found them. Wind pressed her coat flat against her ribs. Far below, frost had already returned to the cinders, whitening the ballast where the day's sun had touched it away. Her own footprints from the morning were gone under shade. The fresh prints she had followed were probably hardening at the shaft, changed from signs into memory. She looked at the dark notch of the tracks and understood with a force that made her angry. Leaving would not make her free. It would only make her alone again, carrying one more door she had not opened all the way. She crawled back inside. The new air changed the mine immediately. In the south vent passage, smoke from a relit punk stick streamed toward the underpantry, then lifted through hidden cuts above. The lamp burned taller. Iris dragged the stone slab partly back, not closed, just shielded, and marked the inside with chalk. Open from top peg. A draft moved through the underpantry. The black pipes clicked. The room seemed to stand straighter. Olin nodded toward the stove. Now, we can burn small. Iris laid kindling, then coal from a scuttle, then used the cap lamp flame to coax the fire alive. Smoke hesitated, then found its path and rose cleanly. Heat gathered not just from the pipes, now, but from the corner, rich and orange. She hung a kettle from the swing arm because it seemed expected, then looked embarrassed by the domesticity of the act. Olin said nothing about it. He only closed his eyes when the kettle began to mutter. Night settled above. Hask shouted down twice. The first time, Iris answered that the vent was open. The second time, Olin told him to keep the shaft covered with no more than tarp and boards, not fill, and to leave the cage lodged until morning. Hask argued, but less than before. The other man, whose name seemed to be Bren, complained about cold. Iris nearly shouted that he should come inside and learn comparison, but she held her tongue. The night did not become easy after that. It became survivable. Hask shouted down twice more, first to say he and Bren were moving the truck to a lower switchback before the road turned to glass, then to say they had left tarps and a lantern at the collar and would return with more rope at first light. Iris wanted to call him a liar. Instead, she listened to the truck crawl away and learned the sound of the wheel well enough to hear when grit entered the chute. Twice she went back with the hook and cleared pale mineral chips from the spring teeth. Once she tightened the belt cradle by a hand width while Olin talked her through it from the table, his voice thin but steady. Between tasks, she read more of the cloth record and found no grand speeches, only instructions. Rotate beans before hard frost. Keep the cover light. Mark every repair. Never ask a hungry person to prove hunger. Near dawn, Olin made her write on the slate board. Wheel cleared by Iris Calder. South vent opened through day crack. Hoist cage set against capping. She hesitated over her own name, but he told her that unmarked work was how useful people became ghosts. She wrote it badly, the letters cramped, and then stood looking at them as if they belonged to someone with an address. Morning came as a pale square above the shaft. Hask returned with Bren, 2 roadmen, a stretcher. and an expression that could not decide whether it wanted to be anger or shame. The rescue took most of the morning. They could not drag Olin by rope without worsening the injury, so Iris worked the brake from below while Hask handled the cage from the collar. She told him where the painted mark had to meet the notch, how many turns the keeper nut could take, and why the counterweight must not be trusted to settle by itself. He argued once. She asked whether he knew what happened after the fourth turn. He stopped arguing. When Olin finally reached daylight, wrapped on the pipe board and gray with pain, the men gathered around him as if they had not expected an old hidden system to produce a living witness. Iris climbed out last. Frost struck her face. The footprints Olin had left were still visible at the rim, but now they had been crossed by hers, by Hask's heavy boots, by Bren's uncertain steps, and by the drag marks of the stretcher. The ground no longer told a story of someone vanishing. It told a story of people almost arriving too late. Hask looked from the shaft to Iris. He noticed the soot on her cheek, the wet cuffs, the repaired boot, the lamp hooked to her coat. He said the county wanted the shaft secured. Iris said then they should secure it without killing the air. Gate it, not cap it. Leave the ladder. Leave day crack open with a stone shield. Replace the cracked belt bracket. Mark the warm room. On no tourist map, but make sure someone who understood the wheel checked it before every freeze. Hask said the county would not take instructions from a girl with no address. There it was, plain as a nail. The old shrinking began in her chest, the trained retreat that had carried her out of shelters, offices, kitchens, and truck stops before anyone could say the next humiliating thing. But the mine had given her a different measure during the night. It had not asked for an address before requiring skill. It had asked whether she could turn a wheel, clear a vent, set a brake, tend a fire, and stay when leaving would have been easier. Iris nodded toward Olin and said Hask could claim the instructions came from him. Olin, from the stretcher, lifted his head and said, "No. Say they came from the person who was down there when the rest of you were guessing." By noon, nobody had capped the shaft. By evening, the first gate frame stood over the collar, ugly but strong, with wire mesh set back from the airflow and a sign painted in Hask's stiff hand. Danger. Old shaft. Do not enter without a keeper. Leave air. The word keeper bothered Iris until Olin, returned from the clinic on crutches 2 days later, explained that a keeper was not an owner. A keeper kept the thing and the promise attached to it. Winter entered the basin in steps after that. Snow erased the mine road, returned, erased it again. Hask brought lumber without speeches. Bren brought potatoes, and an apology so tangled that Iris accepted the potatoes first and let the apology find its own way. Olin could not climb for weeks, so Iris became the legs of the underpantry. She learned the weight of dry wool, the smell of a spoiled tin before it opened, the sound a healthy belt made in the wheelhouse, and the exact resistance of the vent door when wind pressed against it from outside. The place wasn't magic. It survived because neglect had not yet outweighed care. People came, never many at once. A woman with a cough, and 2 boys who flinched at raised voices. A quarry cook laid off without wages. An old man whose blanket had frozen stiff behind the feed store. They arrived by rumor, by Hask's gruff directions, by Olin's judgment, and once by following Iris's footprints after a snow squall. She gave them soup without asking where they had failed. She showed them where to hang wet socks, where to stack wood, how to close the shaft door lightly and never smother the breathing gap. On the longest night of winter, wind bowed the pines and filled the rail cut with blowing snow. Iris climbed alone to the collar to check the gate. Below, the tracks were nearly buried, but moonlight found the packed paths crossing them. Hask's broad steps from a supply run, the children's uneven marks, the quarry cook's careful line, Olin's crutch holes near the gate, and her own footprints going out and coming back so many times that they had become a pale road. They did not end at the mine shaft anymore. They entered, left, crossed, returned, and began again. Iris stood with one hand on the cold gate and felt warm air rise through the gap she had refused to let them seal. There would always be towns with ordinances. There would always be papers that called living places empty and people without addresses invisible. She did not mistake one hidden room for an answer to all of that. The underpantry was only stone, water, wood, old iron, and hands willing to work before dawn. Only was not a small word. She descended before the lamp could gutter. At the bottom, heat met her. The wheel kept time below, and someone had left half a biscuit beside her enamel cup because shared food belonged where a person would find it. Iris closed the shaft door lightly behind her, picked up the kettle, and went to pour for the one still awake.